everybody. Welcome to Lacrosse Now. That is Travis Eldridge. I am Tom Eschen, getting you ready for another full weekend of lacrosse games, and it should be a fun one at that. We're getting down to the wire here, so we got some big ones, and we'll pick our biggest men's game of the day. We'll also go around the country with the women's quick picks, too.
Yeah, we're going to break down some particular teams on the men's side with Evan Washburn, our friend. He calls games for CBS Sports Network. He got a chance to see Georgetown and Loyola earlier this week. He's on the call for Army and Navy this weekend. So we break down the Patriot League and Georgetown with Evan. Also, we get to know Towson attackman Nick DeMaio, a Maryland transfer who is a California kid with a Boston accent.
Yeah.
Go figure. He's an interesting character.
Yeah, I didn't even know those existed. So he is one of one.
He's one of a kind.
He's a unique character, as they say. This should be a good weekend once again, and we'll go to the Ivy League for my biggest game, because there are some different candidates for big games. You got Richmond at High Point. I think that's an interesting one.
Yep.
You know, obviously Jacksonville has proven that they are the top team right now in the SoCon, but Richmond High Point always should be a good game and a big game at that, important for both those teams. Virginia-Syracuse, one of the ones I was looking at, but I think that maybe in this year doesn't really pales in comparison to some of the other games we've seen them have in terms of what it means at the end of the year. I think Virginia wins that game, by the way. What about you?
Yeah, it's hard to pick Syracuse with what we've seen.
All right. I thought you were hedging your bets.
No.
Whoa.
It's really, I mean, now if there's any series that the unpredictable happens even in different years, but especially with the fact that it feels like Virginia needs to win.
Yeah,
because like they did not look that good against Duke last week.
No, but it feels like they've had their bumps in the road. Right? This would be a bump in the road that they have traditionally, it feels like, on a yearly basis. It feels like they've had their bumps in the road. Syracuse has had their moments with the win over Duke. Should have beaten Cornell, weren't able to do that. It kind of feels like these two teams are setting off in their own directions at this point in the season.
Yeah, Virginia has to win that game. They lose to Syracuse, then
they do. Yeah,
I mean, they're really starting to kind of find themselves into like no man's land.
Yeah, but I don't think there's a question in which they lose that game. I don't think there's a scenario in which that happens.
Anyway.
I look also to the Ivy League. Penn and Dartmouth, I think, is really interesting.
I'm going to talk about that in a second.
Okay, you'll talk about that. Michigan, Ohio State, I think, is also interesting. Michigan pushed Rutgers over the weekend, and Ohio State still trying to, we don't know what kind of team they have, but they are a team that, if they get hot at the right time, can make that run in the Big Ten tournament and maybe make a run at a bid, possibly. Who knows?
Well, and remember, last year, Michigan beat Ohio State,
yes.
I believe it was last year, for the first time ever.
Yeah.
So talk about redemption game for Ohio State. And this, I mean, I think Michigan has proven that they are a different team than we've seen in years past. Now the question is, how do you compete against Ohio State in a big spot? I'm really intrigued by what we see there, but I think it's hard to underestimate the redemption factor for Ohio State after you lose to your big rival for the first time.
In a rivalry game, for sure. And Maryland Johns Hopkins, speaking of rivalry games, also this
Talking
weekend.
About a game where sometimes anything can happen, but I would be very surprised if...
I was thinking the spread was about 5.5 goals.
Yeah, I mean...
What you got? Over or under? What do you take?
Honestly, if it wasn't this rivalry, I think I would take over 5.5 goals, in terms of what the difference is. But being that it's Hopkins, Maryland... It feels like, maybe like 4.5, 5 is the right spread.
Yeah, I think Maryland starts off that game well. I think they're going to come in with a purpose into Homewood.
If Hopkins wants any chance, they have to get off to a fast start.
Yeah.
Maryland has done it all year. They've put people behind. If Hopkins wants any chance in that game, they have to get up early.
They have to lead 6-0 is my guess. They could lead 4 or 5-0. I think they need to lead 6-0 to win that game.
That's the
only scenario.
Like,
know, in like Endgame or Avengers, it's like there's one. You have one scenario out of a trillion or whatever it is. You have one scenario. That's it.
And even that may be tough.
Anyway,
our game of the weekend.
Wait. Dylan, our producer, you haven't seen Endgame, Avengers before?
No.
Wow. Okay. You give me a hard time all the time about
I'm not a big Avengers
Ted Lasso and all these other things.
I'm not a big Avengers guy. Haven't jumped into the universe, the Marvel universe. I'm not.
Have you watched any of those movies?
Not really, no.
Not really. Okay.
No, I mean, I've seen Black Widow and.
That's wonderful. That's lovely.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's a good one to watch if you're going to watch it on its own.
Yeah.
I approve of that.
Okay.
Anyway, all right. So let's get back to the deal here. We went through some of the honorable mentions.
Yes.
If you will. I'm going Brown-Cornell as the biggest game because this one also intrigues me the most. The way Brown's playing, the way Cornell is playing. It feels like, talked about Virginia and Syracuse going on different paths. It feels like Brown and Cornell the last couple times out have gone on different paths. Discussed this a bit on Tuesday with Cornell. They just haven't looked all that great as of late. I mean, I know they beat Syracuse, rivalry game, still didn't play all that well, in order to come back and beat Syracuse. They had to get a lot done and had to do a lot in the second half to be able to do so. And you have Brown coming in as one of the hottest teams in the country, wins against Penn, Yale. They have a one-goal win against Nova as well over the course of this season. You look at the matchup and you look at what has forced Cornell to struggle. And, of course, they lose to Army. And Army puts up, 17 goals it was the other day?
Yeah.
And, I think that maybe the similar formula for Brown because Brown has 4 different guys that have scored more than 20 goals this year. And I think that's really interesting. They're the only Ivy League team to be able to say that. And we've talked so much about Cornell and Gavin Adler, and how Gavin Adler's been able to shut down a main guy. Nick Turn for Army, 2 goals, 2 assists, but they did a lot of different things. They had 10 different goal scorers in that game against Cornell. So maybe there's a bit of a formula there that I think Army can mirror in the way that they can score some goals. Brown can mirror in the way they can score some goals. I mean, Ryan Ogevin, who we had on, 21 goals, 9 assists, kind of that volume shooter the last couple games, 4 goals and an assist on 18 shots against Yale, 2 goals on 12 shots against Penn. Then they got Devin McLean, who's got 25 goals and 19 assists. Brian Antonelli, 22 goals. Darian Cook, 21 goals. I think they can spread things out enough where they're going to make things really difficult on the Cornell defense, where it doesn't have to be just one guy. There is a guy to do it, but it doesn't have to be Ogevin who, will take all the shots. He hasn't done that all year long. Just been these last few games in which they've been good. We'll see if they can do that, but they don't have to do that.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to go through him. It can go through a few different guys, which I think will give Cornell some problems. And we talked about the goalie issues. Can Chase Erlin go and play a full game for them before getting pulled too early and cause some hecticness there? So I think that this will be an interesting game, especially, of course, when you get into the Ivy League. Everything's always interesting. Cornell finishes up against Brown and Princeton.
Not easy.
They're 3-1 right now. You finish 3-3, and Brown, it's right in front of you. You beat Cornell, and we'll talk about Dartmouth in a second, but that's not nearly the task that it would take to beat a Yale down the stretch or a Princeton down the stretch. And you can beat a team like Dartmouth and get to 4 wins. And you're smooth sailing if you win this game into that conference tournament without having to worry about the at-large and not making the tournament. So this game, to me, is really interesting. And I think that Brown, the way they're playing, can go in there and win. I think it's going to be really difficult because that's how it feels. And I feel like we've had some predictions this year where it's like, everything's aligning this way for Brown to go in and beat Cornell because they're going this way. But then you look and think about how things are shaping up. It's like, sometimes it's just the opposite of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You got to go into that locker room and think, okay, Cornell's really motivated here to get things back on track.
So who do you like? I know we're not picking
We're not picking this?
No. I mean, do you have a feel? Because you're right. Because you have 2 teams going in complete opposite directions. Nobody's been hotter than Brown because they lost the 3 in a row, and then they come back-to-back with huge wins.
Yeah. So, therefore, it would make sense that Cornell would win this game.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
Because you know what? That's because it's the opposite, right? Because that's how things go. It's hard to string together a bunch of wins like this in a row, especially in this league. You look at conference play. Yeah, you can look good for a couple weeks, and then someone can hit you, early on. And Cornell has the ability to do that. They can score some goals with that. I love that attack unit for Cornell with Piatelli, Long, and company. And it doesn't have to do it on the defensive end. And get some early stops, get ahead, and be able to win that game early.
Yeah, that could be a really fun game because Brown's offense likes to get up and down.
Yeah, they do.
So that could be fun. All right, I'm going to stay in the Ivy League. We mentioned some of the other games happening, and it just I know we've talked a lot about the Ivy League, but it's so intriguing with all the teams you have in the top 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 teams in the country if you include Brown. And this Princeton-Harvard game interests me a lot because Harvard's fallen off here in the last couple of weeks because they've kind of fallen back to earth from the team that we thought at the beginning of the year could be a contender, at least for that kind of 4th spot in the Ivy League tournament.
Yeah.
So here it is. Princeton, you get it home. They are unbeaten at home this year. They're in Cambridge, which I think is interesting because the 2 games they've lost here in back-to-back weeks were on the road. So you get Princeton at home, and you got to look at the face-off X in this matchup because Harvard ranks 67th out of 72 teams in the country at face-off win percentage. They're at 39%. But you look back at the beginning of the year, they played BU at home. Really tough, and they go off and I believe they won 60 or 70% of the faceoffs against a good faceoff unit for BU. So it's kind of been give and take. In these back-to-back losses, they've been under 40% at the X. They have to do better than that against Tyler Sandoval at Princeton. If they can just keep this 50-50, Harvard at home, I think has a shot. But they finish the season against Yale next week, and I don't know how that's going to go. So I think this is the game. If you're going to win one, get yourself an opportunity to get in the tournament. You get this one. You could, even if you lose against Yale next week, you can finish at 3-3, and you're in the mix. What I think everybody assumes there's going to be a bunch of teams tied at 3-3 in the middle fighting for that 4th playoff spot. So I'm intrigued to see what Harvard does at home because after back-to-back games on the road that they lost, they've been good at home. And I think if there's anything you can fix, you can figure out a way to get a few more possessions. If they can do that at the face-off spot, I think they have a chance.
Yeah, and you wonder, is this, Princeton finishing up with Harvard and Cornell? How well will they play down the stretch? We know they haven't had a great season. Are they really an elite team that we can talk about that will make the championship and have a chance to beat Maryland and revenge that loss in which they looked okay against Maryland? Not many teams can say that. So are these final 2 tests in conference play an opportunity for Princeton to say, no, we're head and shoulders above a lot of the rest around here? And I think they have an opportunity to do that. You go to Harvard and win, and then you go and host Cornell the next week. Can you win that game too against maybe a hungry Cornell team, depending on their season, depending on what they need to do?
And the thing with Princeton too, they did not look convincing against Dartmouth this past weekend. It was a 12-10 game, and Dartmouth won 70% of the faceoffs. So if there's a chance for Harvard to maybe steal a couple extra faceoffs, or for Princeton to prove, hey, that was just an anomaly and we're good, I think that's another aspect of this game that's interesting.
I think Princeton wins out.
Think so?
I think they win and
they become head and shoulders the team to beat the Ivy League.
I think they are that team. I think there's other teams that have a lot of different questions, but I think the way Princeton's done it on the defensive end, their goaltending has been good as well. And like you said, on the face-off with Sandoval, I think they have enough pieces where you can say, okay, they checked that box, they checked that box. I think they're a team that can prove that. They just got to go out and win.
They've been the most consistent team in the Ivy League all year.
Yeah, you look for teams, I think, that you try to find a weakness, and you have to look pretty hard. And I don't know if they have as many as maybe a Yale does or a Cornell at this point in the season.
Well, and there's been a lot of talk about the Ivy League, and they did great out of conference, but where's the consistency once you've gotten in it? And if there's any team that's shown more of the consistency once they've gotten into the conference, it's been Princeton.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I think Penn may be the only other team that I think you can say from top to bottom is as close, but they haven't had the wins to go back that up.
Exactly. Now they've lost a bunch of games in conference, and now all of a sudden you're scratching your head.
On paper, Penn looks great. They haven't gotten that on the field. I think Princeton's done a better job of translating all of that.
Yeah. Anyway, talking about some of the top teams in the country, Evan Washburn had a chance to call the Georgetown Loyola game this past week. Got a really good look at the Hoyas. I had a chance to talk to him about that and about the Patriot League. So we have our friend Evan Washburn joining us now. Had a chance to call the Loyola Georgetown game earlier this week for CBS Sports Network. He's on the call for Army and Navy this weekend. Evan, we appreciate you taking some time here, man. Welcome back to lacrosse.
Yeah, it's good to be back, not just in the game, but with you guys. And it's been way too long. And it's a wild season. And I'm looking forward to May living up to that May Madness moniker.
Yeah, it's been a fun season so far. And the Patriot League, a league that you know well, has been crazy. But I want to start with Georgetown, a team you saw here on Tuesday. It's crazy to think about how many struggles they've had against Loyola, including last year was the game that kind of turned around Loyola's season. This year, Georgetown goes out, doubles up the Greyhounds. What impressed you the most about what you've seen from Georgetown this year?
Man, there was a lot to pick from in that game. I think I will go defense first because early in that game against Loyola, you could feel a bit of that tightness, the history that this rivalry has presented, which is no matter the records, Loyola's really owned it. And the offense for the Hoyas that's been really potent all year long, one of the best in the country, just didn't play well. They were turning it over. It was kind of looking a lot like the game the year prior. And the defense is what held things together and allowed the time for the offense to find their legs. And it's a defense that's got, I think, by my count, maybe 4 All-Americans that are carrying poles when you factor in Mazzone at long stick midfielder, and then obviously Owen McElroy at goalie, who's goalie of the year. So, I mean, you put it all together, you got like 5 All-Americans, and you bring in Will Bowen, but they all play their roles really well. No one's out there kind of doing their own thing, and they assert their will. I mean, they got game records all over the place, and Loyola's offense isn't what it was a few years ago with Pat Spencer, obviously, but they still play a disciplined brand, and they made them really look bad because I think it was close to 20 turnovers in that game. So I think the defense is what impressed me the most after that one.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this roster, and you mentioned the defense. Like, you've got Gibson Smith, who was a first-team All-American type poll last year, and then you bring in Will Bowen, who is maybe the most highly regarded transfer of anybody in the country, because you bring in another All-American close defenseman. I mean, to try to figure out that defense, like, is there a weak spot that, like, in an opposing team, whether it's when you look ahead to May, a top end team like a Maryland or a Princeton, is there any spot you can pick at?
Absolutely not. I mean, the weakness I see in Georgetown, we could start with the defense, but as a whole, is their lack of depth. I mean, they really run 4 middies offensively. They run those 3 close and the 1 pole Mazzone, and then they'll spell Mazzone a little bit, but he plays most shifts. So I think the recipe to try and find success against that defense is by dominating the faceoff X, so that you're just getting multiple chances at them and you try and wear them down in that way and hope that McElroy is having an off day in cage, which we just haven't seen much of. Because if the possessions are limited, and James Riley's done a nice job of that at the X for Georgetown, then it kind of plays to their hand. And that's where I just don't see a weakness. But if you're able to constantly test them and you have talented shooters that would be existing with a team like Virginia or Notre Dame or Maryland. I mean, look, the teams that we know are often hanging around late in May, then maybe you have a shot. But if you're not winning faceoffs, you're not turning them over offensively and creating transition, obviously the unsettled, but man, they're so good off the ground too. So there's no visible weakness other than depth, and if they were to have to see the ball for the majority of a game.
Yeah, and that's what I think, and just all the different stars, because we haven't even talked about the offense, but Dylan Watson, who missed the beginning part of the season due to injury, it comes out, scores 5 goals, including maybe one of the best of the year we saw in that game against Loyola. Graham Bundy, I don't know if you had a chance to talk to him, but we had him on the show earlier, maybe one of the most impressive people I think I've spoken to, just like as a man off the field, and he's a great midfielder on it. Does this Georgetown team feel like a team that could be the one that gets them over the top and into the Final Four? Like, does it feel different?
No doubt. Look, it's a program that's rich with history, and it's still surprising when you look at the fact they've never been to a Final Four. And this goes back to the Brody Merrill days, the Kyle Sweeney days, whatever version of this program you want to pick from. This is the best team they've ever had. And I would argue, and I made the point on the broadcast, and Maryland's got a great argument in their own right, but you talk about starting groups on both ends and then at the face-off, I might take Georgetown over anybody in the country right now. It's just once you get past them, and this is where it becomes a factor in the NCAA tournament, as temperatures rise, injuries can rear their ugly head. And then, hey, if you get to the Final Four, you got to win on a Saturday and a Monday. But to your point, yes, this is the best opportunity Georgetown has. I like the makeup mentality-wise, too, of this team, Travis. One, it's felt like they've kind of flown under the radar despite their ranking and despite the expectations. I think that's a product of not being on television really at all. I mean, our game on Tuesday night, I think, was their first nationally televised game they'll get it back in the Big East tournament, and then they'll obviously be on the big stage come the NCAA tournament. So I think that's kept some of the attention away from them. And then they've done a nice job. You talk to their staff, whether it's Kevin Warren or their offensive coordinator, Michael Phipps, they're all in it. And that's a product of the transfers and having guys that are only going to be on campus for 1 year that are there for one reason and one reason only. It's to get them to the Final Four and maybe compete for a national championship. So as good as they were last year and as nice as it was to have a Tewaaraton finalist and Jake Caraway, this team feels almost, bonded to a stronger degree because a lot of the guys were a part of that. And then they brought in these players to allow them to take that next step.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up being under the radar because I think everybody sees the talent on paper and you go, okay, this team feels like they should be really good, but because of Georgetown's history, everybody maybe is a little cautious to go, all right, that's the team that's going to get them to the Final Four. Like until somebody does it, it's hard to say like, all right, I'm all in on that squad.
And that's fair. And I think they acknowledge that too. They know that all of the hype around them, whether it's a lot or growing over the course of the next few weeks here, means nothing until they get over that quarterfinal hump. And especially when you factor in the way they lost to UVA in that game. I mean, Kevin, we're speaking to him on Monday ahead of the Loyola game on Tuesday night, and he's going back through last year, and he mentions not even showing up really for that quarterfinal game. They acknowledge that they got there, but for them, it almost felt like the embarrassment of that game sits with them and allows them to stay humble and stay focused on the task at hand this season.
So let's look now to the Patriot League. On the other side of that game on Tuesday night you did was Loyola, and it has felt like the whole year we've been waiting for the Greyhounds to show up because they brought a ton back from a team that was not far from being in the Final Four a year ago with that late season run, and they just have never quite clicked. When you've seen Loyola this year, what is the difference?
It's tough to pinpoint because all the points you bring up are valid ones. The two things, and this is based off of kind of looking at it from the outside and then also getting a chance to talk to whether it's Charlie Toomey or those with the program. One, they had a really tough start to the season, and I don't think that can be overlooked. They played really high-quality opponents, but they still started 0-4. And I think that sets a tough tone and foundation to a team. Now, you think, well, hey, they can lean on the fact that they have something like 10 grad students that have been in the program. You have really strong leadership, and that's true, but the roster makeup is also a bit odd. And I know this is a theme throughout college lacrosse where you've got 10 graduate students and then you've got 10 freshmen. So you've got 10 guys that are 23 years old, living off campus, thinking about things outside of lacrosse in their life. And then you've got 10, 18-year-olds that are coming in, not playing. And the sense I got from some of the conversations that it's taken a while for them to basically become a team outside of the starting 11 that are playing on Saturdays. And that stuff matters, Travis. You know that, like the dynamics in the locker room, how productive and competitive is practice. And then there's the on the field product. And I think Loyola is playing to the standard in a lot of ways, disciplined, they play hard, but they lack a punch offensively from both the midfield and the attack. They have high quality players, and they're actually deeper in a lot of ways than they've been in years past, but especially against opponents like a Georgetown, but even BU, who plays a unique style, they didn't have somebody to grab control offensively from my view, and it's just tough for them to score. And then on the other side of the ball, defensively, they have a lot of really quality players, but the inconsistency in cage is something that makes you vulnerable. You're not sure what you're getting there. And they just haven't been specific to the BU game, mentally tough to handle some of the waves that come and be able to respond. So I think there's still a threat in the Patriot League, but it seems like they've been chasing it all year long. And I'm not, at some point, you are what you are. And that could be coming up here. That's why this Colgate game is so key for them, despite Colgate, not having the record that would show that. But it's a huge game for Loyola.
Yeah, they're right in it. I mean, you got 2 games left in the Patriot League. They got Colgate and Lehigh left. You win both of those, you're right there in the top 4, maybe in the mix for the top 2, and you see what happens in the tournament. You brought up BU, and I think BU has been the kind of the, if you have a Georgetown type analogy in the league, it's been BU because they've been knocking on the door here. And now all of a sudden they've got 2 tough games left, but they're undefeated. They're top of the standings. And I felt like that Loyola win for them just mentally was huge because it like gets them over that hurdle. Like, okay, we took down the team that's been one of the perennial powers. Now if we can finish strong, maybe this is our year.
Absolutely. I thought that the Loyola game was massive for this year's version of the Terriers, but that program at large, it was a box they needed to check. Loyola is not what they've been in previous years, but going to Ridley, going down to Baltimore, beating that team and beating them the way they did. It was tied at half, and then that's usually when Loyola comes out. And honestly, I feel like Loyola expected that. They expected to come out in the third, and BU would get a little tight and start to kind of turtle, if you will. And they did the exact opposite. They stepped on the neck of Loyola and they grabbed that game. And that's huge because you're right. This is the stretch that's going to define them and allow the rest of us and those of us on the outside in the college lacrosse world to say, okay, BU's a program that should be reckoned with because they beat Loyola, they beat Lehigh, they're hosting the Patriot League tournament if they beat Army. I mean, obviously the next 2 weeks are big here, but I like the makeup of this team, and I feel much better about it after the Loyola game because of what they were able to do.
I know they've lost Jay Cates here. You saw them just recently. Does it fit, like when you talk about their offense, is it different with him out of the lineup? Because he had been pretty good at the early part of the year.
It is, but let's be real. I mean, they score based off of their attack. Cates was important, and I think they're going to still need production from the midfield, but I think it was like 70% of the point total came from those 3 at the attack position before the Cates injury. So now it bumps up to like 76%. So that's the what stirs the drink. But I think I'm looking at BU a lot like some of the Bucknell teams when Federacas had that group rolling, and you got the Will Sands and those groups, and they're making runs not just to win the Patriot League, but challenging teams in the first round of the NCAA tournament. That to me is the model for BU because they play that way defensively, quick sliding, creating havoc, and then offensively with those 3. I mean, Perfetto he was special in that game. They've got a style that frustrates you defensively and can beat you in different ways. So look, they're set up to try and make a run here, and it's going to be fun to watch down the stretch.
All right, let's talk about the game you have this weekend. Obviously, Army-Navy, outside of just the Patriot League, is a special, special game. It's always a special atmosphere. And you know what? Like, as much as Navy it's kind of middle of the road here in the Patriot League with what they've done, they haven't surprised anybody in the Patriot League yet. I mean, Joe Amplo can get that team up. We saw what they did on the road against Hopkins earlier this year, and it feels like if there's a time that Army needs to be on like upset alert kind of, it's probably this weekend.
And all they have to do is look back to last year's meeting against Navy in Annapolis. I mean, it was a similar scenario. Now, Navy was a bit better. Joe Alberisi was reminding us of that last year in terms of ranking. I mean, I think they were ranked 16th and Army was ranked 12th, but Army was the heavy favorite, if you will, and Navy controlled that game and won it. It was an ugly, low-scoring affair. I think it's going to be an electric atmosphere on Saturday at noon at Michie Stadium. The weather's supposed to be nice. They're doing everything they can to try and pack that place because they haven't played Navy at home. And I think it's been 4 years because of the oddity of the scheduling, because of COVID. And so all that said, it's been a long time, and these seniors haven't gotten a chance to sing second, if you will, at home. So all those factors kind of build this fervor for this game, and couldn't be more excited about it. On paper, it's hard to see how Navy's going to be able to win this game because of the fact that this Army team, to me, Travis, and look, you've watched them as much, if not more, than I have. They seem different in a lot of ways, especially offensively. Nick Turn's been there. He's a Tewaaraton caliber player, but the pieces around them, and they're playing with a bit more freedom, look more explosive. It's not always a grinder of a game, which is kind of what you expected from Army. And their defense is a bit thin because Hudgens hasn't been able to play this year, but they're still doing a lot of the things that are part of the identity of that program.
Yeah, and you mentioned Nick Turn. Like, he has, at this point of the year, and especially after what they've done and where they are in the rankings, like, they closed this season out strong and win the Patriot League. It seems like he's got to be headed to the Towson ceremony as a finalist.
Yeah, I look at him like a lot like Caraway of Georgetown a year ago, where, look, it's going to be tough for him to win it because you've got Chris Gray and Wisnauskas, and it often goes to not only that type of production, but that type of run through May, as we well know. But if he can, to your point, continue to be a big impact player, not just down the stretch here, but maybe in the first round of the tournament, then he becomes a guy that represents Army West Point in DC, which would be special. And I love the fact that, watching as much as I have been able to this year, Nick Turn's development, where because there seems to be more confidence in the pieces around him, and while the numbers might not reflect it because he's uber productive, he doesn't seem to be forcing it as much, and he kind of bides his time and waits till he needs to take a game over. And when he does, it usually is a positive.
So we'll leave you at this, because we've gone through the Patriot League, and like, it's any one of the teams that we've mentioned, whether it's BU, Lehigh, Loyola, Army, it feels like any one of them could walk out with the Patriot League title. And they've all been, in different times this year, I feel like, relevant nationally, but it seems like only one of them is going to go to the NCAA tournament. If you had to pick now, who would you pick out of this conference?
It's tough. I mean, I think you feel the best right now about Army because of what they just showed us against Cornell. And I said it on Tuesday night, and I know it's starting to build some momentum, not just for myself, but others. Like, I'm not sure about the Ivy League. I think it's been a great story, but I don't know if those wins are going to, when we look back at the end of the year, whether it's results in the NCAA tournament or even in the next couple of weeks here, are going to be as impressive as they are right now. But that's the best win of the conference. I love Lehigh in the tournament setting because they have a way of kind of just, building themselves up for it. Kevin Cassis does a phenomenal job with that. The idea of how to win 2 games and whatever ends up being 3 days. So I kind of lean that way, but I really, Travis, am going to say whoever's hosting it, I feel the best about. So it really, at this point, is Army, BU, or Lehigh. Because remember, Lehigh beat Army. So despite the fact they dropped that game last week, they're still in the mix to host this thing. So I'll say I feel the best about probably Army right now, but I really would sort of come back around in, I guess, a week or so and say, well, if it's at BU, then I feel pretty good about BU. If it's at Army, I feel, if it's at Lehigh, because I think that does matter as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be a fascinating final 2 weeks of the regular season. Make sure you check out Evan on the Call for Army-Navy this weekend. That should be always a really special game. It should be another good one. Evan, appreciate the time, man. Enjoy. Yeah,
always great to be with you guys, and hopefully we're talking again soon.
Always good to catch up with our buddy Evan.
I do think that Army needs more love right now. I think that Army has done enough, and of course you have to look at their RPI and all, but the RPI isn't the Bible, okay? We act like the
committee
RPI is the Bible, and I disagree with that.
Bible.
I look at Army compared to maybe a North Carolina, who in some projections is in over Army right now if it's an at-large bid. I think Army's a better team up and down than North Carolina. Of course, this is being taped before North Carolina plays Notre Dame tonight, and I don't even know if I would change my mind if North Carolina beats Notre Dame tonight. I think Army, if they can take care of business down the stretch, they should be in regardless. That is my thought. I think that they have not been talked about enough. They're a top 10 team.
Yeah, I think Army, if they're going to be an at-large bid, probably has to win out here in the regular season. And then if maybe they lost in the Patriot League championship, I think they'd have a shot. Mm-hmm. But I think that's the only way.
Yeah, I know.
And I think that's a legitimate way.
Yeah, I agree. They can't mess anything up.
They can't trip up.
They can't trip up in the final stretch. But I think if they take care of business, they deserve to be in over a team like a North Carolina. If North Carolina Yeah, I don't know if they lost or whatever tonight, or if they lose to Duke down the final stretch. I mean, or if they beat Duke, even if they have to win. I think North Carolina has to win out too.
Probably, yeah.
Right.
I would agree.
I think if both teams win out, I think Army should be better.
Army, with what they're going to face in the Patriot League tournament, I feel like probably has a better opportunity to get quality wins than North Carolina.
They take on a BU who's got a good RPI.
Lehigh. Well, Lehigh's kind of bumped down.
Loyola, I think, is
top
20. I think Loyola is. I'm not sure for sure, but yeah. Anyway.
Speaking of
CAA.
Speaking of conferences that are fascinating.
Yes.
The CAA is crazy. We got 3 teams at 2-1.
Got 3 teams
fighting at 1-2. We have a chance to do Towson and Fairfield. Myself and Marcus Holman on the call this weekend right here on Lax Sports Network. It is a 3:30 game on Saturday afternoon. So at mid-afternoon, should be a terrific game. Battle for CAA supremacy. Both these teams, interestingly enough, are 2-1.
Yeah.
Which I didn't see coming in the beginning of the year.
I mean, but Fairfield hadn't won a conference game in a long time.
Since 2018. They snapped a 16-game conference losing streak earlier this year, and now they're a win away from being at the top of the conference with a game to go.
That's incredible.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a fascinating matchup. If you have not seen these teams play yet this year, this is a game that could be between 2 teams that, I mean, one of these teams may represent the conference in the NCAA tournament because somebody has to. And out of this whole mess of teams, just about anybody could.
Anybody has a chance, and I think depending on who you pick, someone could have a chance at scaring maybe a team in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Because there are some athletes, there's some talent on these teams that, if things go right for them in an NCAA tournament game, I think there's a couple teams that could give, those first round squads some trouble.
Yeah, this game will...
Unless it's Maryland.
Right. Right. Avoid Maryland at all costs. This game going to be a big contrast in styles. If you're not familiar with Fairfield, Andrew Baxter likes this team to get up and down. They score with some of the best in the country. Top 15 offense so far this year. Great man-up unit as well. Towson, you know what you're going to get with the Tigers. Much more settled. So the pace of play will be fun to watch between the Tigers and the Stags. So that game's at 3:30. Earlier this year, had a chance to catch up with Towson's Nick DeMaio, a transfer from Maryland. Didn't play for the Terps, but he comes over to Towson and has been a big part to this offense's success so far this year. He's also a fascinating character. So let's get to know Nick a little bit better. So we're here with Towson attackman Nick DeMaio. Nick, you are a guy who is coming from California when you came out of high school, but you grew up a little bit in Boston. I know your family moved a bit when you were growing up. Are you more a Cali kid or a Boston guy?
I'd say my lacrosse roots are Boston, but high school-wise, I was California. So I would say like that reason, lacrosse in California definitely helped me, but lacrosse in Boston was probably bigger growing up, playing with all those kids and all that, and that roots.
What about personality-wise? Are you more like California or Northeast?
Definitely Boston. I got the Boston accent, everyone tells me. So I'm more Boston related, like accent wise. Definitely everyone makes fun of me for the Boston accent. So California was definitely weird with the accent.
It's okay. I'm used to it. We're up here in Boston. So you just blend right in. It's perfect. Your lacrosse game, you talk a little bit about that. What's the best way, like if somebody asked you to describe your style and game, how do you do it?
I'd say I'm like I find the net. I would say like I find the open areas. I know my guys will pass me the ball, and I've worked on my shooting my whole life with my dad and all that. So it's a little related to my brother Anthony. He's a good shooter too. So I think it just runs in the family. Like the shooting wise, I think that's like a big aspect of our game.
Who do you like to model your game after? Are there a couple of guys that have come before you?
I would say Ryan Brown was definitely one of the best shooters in college lacrosse. So Kyle Marr, too, from Hopkins. I remember growing up watching him play, too. So a couple of those guys that were just great shooters.
You mentioned your brother Anthony, and you have a list of a number of different players in your family, including your dad. Who's the best player in the family?
I'd say my little sister, Sydney. She's up and coming, and she's a freshman in high school right now. So I think she's going to be the best out of the family. She's definitely working the hardest.
It's always the younger siblings that go ahead and beat everybody else because they just get beat up the whole time.
Yeah, once me and Anthony moved on, my 2 other sisters, my dad focused on strictly the girls lacrosse game. So definitely he's focused on them, and she's paying off.
So we'll keep an eye out for Sydney. If you had to pick one throughout any part of your lacrosse career, high school, growing up, club, whatever, what's the favorite goal you scored?
Probably high school. We played Torrey Pines. We scored a goal to go up 5-4, and it was like the biggest upset in California lacrosse history, I'd say. So I think that was like, it was like the most hype I've ever seen, like lacrosse in California, was when we beat Torrey Pines to go up 5-4.
Yeah, it's a prestigious program out there in California.
It was definitely an upset.
When you score and you've got a goal song come on, what's your goal song now and why?
It's called Right Foot Creep. It has to do with the gritty from like it's in Fortnite too, so it's all like they do it in the gritty, like all around. It's kind of just like a celly. It's a good song to like get the crowd hyped too. I see all the little kids in the stands after I score. They're all like hitting the gritty, so it's pretty cool.
Can you do the gritty?
I could, but I'm not the greatest at it. There's a lot of kids in our team that are good at it, but me, I'm not sturdy with it.
So you're not doing that as a celebration.
No, it's more for everyone else, not myself.
Okay. That's fair. I was reading in your bio, your favorite actor is Matthew McConaughey. What's your favorite McConaughey movie?
Fool's Gold, probably. It's a good rom-com, I'd say.
You're a big rom-com guy?
I have recently, yeah. A couple kids at Towson have definitely got me into the rom-com game, where it's not bad. It's not bad.
Yeah, I wouldn't partake you for being a rom-com guy, but now,
I never was. I never was. And then now James Avanzado's a big rom-com guy, so he's got me into it.
Well, I think that's a good way to finish this off. Now we got to know Nick DeMaio from Towson a little bit better. Thanks, man, for the time, and good luck here the rest of the way.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
So, of course, you can see Nick and the Tigers 3:30 Eastern against Fairfield here on Lax Sports Network on Saturday. As for now, women's game. The big game is prior to when is after we are taping this here on Thursday.
Yeah.
Duke and Carolina. So we're not going to touch on that. We talked a lot about it back on Tuesday. Coming off the big win for Duke over the weekend against BC. So we'll talk about that next week, but we got some other big games to get to.
We do. Let's head out west first.
Okay.
And we'll go USC and Arizona State. We've been talking about the Pac-12 as one of the more interesting conferences all year long. Talked about Arizona State all year long as one of the more exciting teams up and coming as a part of that sort of three-team race, USC, Arizona State, and Stanford. And that's what it is heading into this weekend as a regular season titles on the line. All those teams 7-2, I believe, right now. And this is a battle of two 7-2 teams in the Pac-12, Arizona State, USC. These teams met back on March 23rd, a 17-10 win for USC. Arizona State turned the ball over 27 times in that game. That's the one Achilles heel for the Sun Devils. They turned the ball over more than anybody else in the Pac-12, running into a team in USC that turns the ball for the other team over. They turn other teams over at a better rate. They are 142 caused turnovers. That's in 14 games. That's one game less than most of everybody else in the conference. So with that combined with a couple of different factors, I do think it's going to be closer this time around. Arizona State is number one in the league in draw controls. I think if that's the way they've been able to win games. They have the ball, they turn it over, but at least they get it enough where they can sort of mitigate that damage. It's going to be closer. I've got USC 15-13. USC's redshirt freshman, Isabella Vitale. Get a TO, baby. 25 goals, 23 assists, 48 points. That leads the team. She started the season really strong, sort of tailed off mid-March up until last weekend against Oregon. 2 goals, 4 assists in that game. USC scores the ball at such a high clip. I think they're going to have it enough where they're able to put some goals in Arizona State. It'll be a little closer this time around, but I'm still inching towards USC to get this win. And I think that Arizona State might have a little bit something to say about that once we hit the conference tournament and they're hosting in a little while here.
Okay, yeah.
So 15-13 USC.
All right, I like that pick.
Thank you.
Let's go to the ACC. Big game on Friday night as well. These are the games that we've started circled on the calendar at the beginning of the year, and things have played out where they matter here at the end of the season, which is always awesome. We got Syracuse making the trip to Boston College to take on the Eagles. Syracuse's big other test. They lost to Carolina. They had the loss earlier in the season against Northwestern, but this is it. This is kind of your last big test. Can you prove that we are a top 4 team in the country that can compete for a Final Four? But BC has every reason to win this game. They not only is it a Friday night at home, it's the red bandana game. They're celebrating the life and legacy of Wells Crowther. Obviously, emotions in check there. Should be a terrific atmosphere and crowd. and they're coming off the loss against Duke. So I can't imagine that Boston College, if they had beaten Duke like everybody thought they were going to, other than Tom, last weekend, I think this maybe goes a different way. But with all that in play, I just have a really hard time thinking Boston College loses this game at home. I think it's tight at the end. I think maybe Boston College pulls away. Syracuse makes it a little bit closer. I think 16-14 Eagles. The real concern I have for Syracuse is their goalie situation, not only against a really high-powered offense when you're in normal round of normal play, but when you have a goalie situation like Syracuse has had where they have not stopped the ball consistently, and you got Charlotte North taking free positions. Like, if she gets free positions, it's game over against most goalies, even against some of the best in the country. So if you have a spot where that's been a kind of a struggling spot for Syracuse throughout the year, that's a big concern for me. If Charlotte North gets a bunch of opportunities from the 8-meter, it's over.
Yeah, and I think that she's going to be really hungry on the draw after what Maddie Jenner did. And I know that Mashewski's been good on the draw for Syracuse all year long, going through the Kayla Trainer's School of Hard Knocks, if you will, there. But when Charlotte North is hungry and wants something, I think that you got to watch out and get out of the way. And after the Duke performance, like you said, I think they're going to be hungrier than ever, especially to start fast. Because don't forget, Charlotte North didn't score in the first half of that game. I think that's going to be a big point of emphasis for BC to start quickly against Syracuse. And you got the home advantage there, and Syracuse is walking into that. They're walking into the Lions' den. And I agree with you. I think this time around, BC is going to get it done.
And Syracuse also had to play on Tuesday. I mean, they took care of business against UAlbany, but that's a pretty quick turnaround. Tuesday to Friday, you throw out a road trip in there. So I think I like BC.
Yeah, I know. I don't know if it's definite. Like, I think it's going to be close.
I think it's a decent game. I just have a hard time thinking Boston College loses.
Yes, I agree. I agree with you with the fact that if BC maybe beats Duke even late in that game, I think there might be a couple. You might be a little more divided on who wins that game. Okay. Let's go to the Big Ten now. Penn State and Rutgers women. So this is intriguing. Penn State hasn't won a Big Ten game this year. Rutgers is 12-3 overall, 2-2 in the Big Ten. This is another one of those turnover type battles, but on a different side of things. Penn State's been able to stay close in some games because of that. Fewest turnovers in the Big Ten. Rutgers is first in that category, so that evens things out a little bit. Rutgers can't take advantage of that as much as they have in the past. Penn State, really close game with Michigan over the course of the last weekend, and an 8-7 overtime loss. They were able to hold that Michigan offense somewhat quiet, a single-digit goals. Michigan struggled to score as of late, but Penn State able to keep that up in that game. But I do like Rutgers at the end of the line here, 11-9. I think it is going to be a little more low scoring. They last met last year. First time Rutgers has ever beat Penn State. 17-16, that was a close game and a close win. Cassidy Spillis, the first Tewaaraton Award top 25 player in Rutgers program history. That is, it's an individual award, but it shows you the development of this Rutgers program on the women's side over the last couple of years. And I think that, you give them another year or so to continue to develop. And I'm not saying they're going to be in the stratosphere of the Northwesterns and Marylands of the world, but they might be playing, in that tier, sooner than later, the way this program has developed. So that has been awesome. She's got 51 goals, third in the Big Ten. Megan Ball, 37 caused turnovers. That's top 10 in the nation per game. So they've been doing it on both sides of the ball, and I really like the way this program's developed. I do think Penn State does enough to keep it close.
You mentioned Rutgers as a program. It's important for the Big Ten for programs like a Rutgers, a Hopkins, a Penn State, a Michigan because the depth of the conference matters. Yep. How long has it been Northwestern to Maryland and then just everybody else?
Right.
So I like what you said there. All right. Staying in the Big Ten, speaking of the top of the conference, the battle for the regular season title, Northwestern making the trip to Maryland. I've got the Terps in an upset, 15-14. Couple of things into play here. One, 11:30 a.m. Eastern time start at Maryland. So Northwestern coming from Chicago, that's Central time, so it's going to be a 10:30 a.m., what they're used to, start time at Maryland. Plus, it's on the turf field at Maryland. Nobody goes to the turf field at Maryland and wins, well, except for James Madison this year. But for the most part, nobody goes to that turf field at Maryland and wins. I think the Terps are due for a big win. You look at so this is by far the biggest test for Maryland this year. So I think we're going to learn a ton in this game about this Terps team. But you look at their toughest games that they've played to date. they've won them all by double digits. Beat Virginia by 10, they beat Florida by 10, and they beat Princeton by 10. And all of those teams at different parts of the year have challenged other really good teams this year. So you can't dumb down what those victories mean. I think Maryland gets up for this game, and I think defensively is the key. We've seen Northwestern be able to score against just about everybody, but Emily Sterling, the Maryland goalie, leads the nation in save percentage, 55% of the year. Aurora accordingly at the other end leads the nation in points per game. I think those two players really key. They lead Maryland to a win.
And we talk about Aurora accordingly as the big transfer to Maryland. I think Abby Bosco has been every bit as important
huge.
As Aurora accordingly.
For sure.
Abby Bosco on the defensive end and reinforcing that a little bit alongside Sterling. I like that pick. I think Maryland has gone under the radar for a little while now. And maybe that's the way things have gone the last few years. I mean, Maryland in 2019, people weren't really picking them. They were a little bit under the radar again. This feels like a similar team because top to bottom, they can get the job done with the best of them. And now that we saw a little bit of a chink in the armor of a team like Boston College, you start to look at some of these other teams like, well, Maryland, they've got it all. They check the boxes. And I think that this is an opportunity for them against a good Northwestern team that does the same thing. But this time around, I like Maryland at home, too, like you mentioned.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting. Like, you look up and down the schedule, and a lot of the Maryland games that they've played, just for whatever reason, the games haven't looked as impressive because of what some of those other teams have done in other parts of the year. But usually we're used to Maryland playing a really tough schedule. It just hasn't worked out that way because they just didn't happen to have North Carolina on the schedule this year like they have in years past, or haven't had a Boston College or Stony Brook or a Syracuse that have popped up this year. So this is the big test. Is Maryland a Final Four caliber team? We find out this weekend.
Yeah, we do. We're going to be talking about them more, so we can wait for that. All right, let's move on. Temple, Florida, the AAC regular season title on the line. This is going to go to Florida. 15-10 is the final there. Temple's never beaten Florida. Last year, Florida beat them 19-4. The closest this game has ever been was 10-9 in 2016, usually a 10-goal game. So my pick is a little bit closer here, 15-10, as Temple's 15th in the RPI this year, and they've played that to a 10-4 record overall, which shows you they've got some nice wins, 3 in a row, a 20-9 victory over Vanderbilt on the way there, and Vanderbilt is a pretty good team, and they made them, they mopped the floor with them, I guess, in one way or another. Temple coming off a game, so I think this is going to help them, actually. They trailed 6-0 after the first 8 minutes against East Carolina, so I think they're going to be like, okay, we need to start a lot better. So I think it'll help them get off to a better start here. Belle Mastropietro, 40 goals, 56 points. She also leads the American in draw control. So I think that'll help them a little bit more. Mackenzie Roth, 32 assists, 43 goals this year. She's put up some numbers. Then we go to Florida. And they're going to win. They come off a big win over Vandy, 16-8. Pavanelli, 44 goals, 19 assists. Emma Lopinto, the freshman, 61 points this year. You've got Sarah Resnick, Liz Harrison on the draw control. They've got those losses. The 4-goal loss to North Carolina. You just talked about Maryland. Lost by 10 there. They lost by 1 to Stony Brook. I think you want to look at Florida and wonder, is this the team that's going to make the run? Is this the group? Maybe, I don't know if this is the year, I guess, is what I would say. Maybe it's next year when some of these players get a little bit older and more experienced, but it feels like they've got the pieces. They just have to come together at the right time to be able to do so.
I mean, we saw them do it against Syracuse on any given day, especially if Sarah Resnick gets hot. They can contend with just about anybody.
Yeah, you wonder. I was thinking about that when making this pick. I'm like, well, are they a team that we can talk about, and having a chance to be one of those teams invited to the championship weekend?
I mean, if you're one of those, top 5-6 teams that we've been talking about a lot here in the women's game, I don't want to play Florida in that quarterfinal round. Right. I want nothing to do with the Gators.
That is a game that could, depending on who it is, if it's like a Duke-Florida kind of a matchup. Not that I not like Duke, but still, the Florida's a team.
You love Duke.
You get a hot goalie, and you get Duke, a team that can score a lot, and Sarah Resnick starts making some saves. That can make a huge difference and when it all comes down to things. Resnick this year, 10.1 goals against average, 45.5% saves. But we've seen before, you get hot, and she's a goalie that can do that. She can rise to the occasion. So just a side note there on Florida. Just a team to look out for as they take on Temple this week.
All right, my final pick. We got Ohio State Hopkins. We go back to the Big Ten, and there's one thing that stands out about this game.
What's
Janine
that?
Tucker's final season at Johns Hopkins. This is her final regular season home game at Homewood. Do you really think the Blue Jays are going to lose? There's no way.
They've played hard for her this year too. They've been one of the more fun teams
and
to watch.
honestly, these two teams are kind of in a similar spot in the Big Ten from what we've seen so far. I feel like the talent level is similar, but I have to go with the Blue Jays. I like them 13-11, a little bit more low scoring. I think they beat the Buckeyes.
Okay, yeah, I think it's going to be a very close game.
Yeah,
Ohio State,
I think it's a good game.
I think Ohio State has looked good this year at times, and Hopkins has too. They both have shown a lot of potential.
Yes.
And made it really competitive there. Okay, let's go with Navy Army women.
Here we go.
We've
Big
got
rivalry
weekend
weekend.
going on in the men. Now the women, it's going to be close. I've got 11-10 Navy over Army. And Navy's dominated this series. They've won all 6 games. Last year was close, the closest it's ever been, 13-12 Navy. Army, of course, graduating some athletes, but Michelle Tumalo has done such a wonderful job with this program in her first year. They have lost 3 straight going into this. Yale, Bucknell, and Loyola. A 16-7 loss against Loyola. Though Carly Armstrong, sophomore attacker, had 4 goals against Loyola. So if you're able to do that, I feel like, and she's got 40 goals this year, she was the bright spot. That can continue. She's probably pretty confident heading into this game against Navy. Navy has yet to play Loyola. They played Loyola in the next week.
Final week of the regular season.
So this is, I know it's a rivalry game. You never look past it, but there's still some things for them to be able to accomplish here. And especially when you play the best in Army and playing Loyola, who's the class of the conference, you learn something from that. I don't know if Army's learned those or Navy's learned that lesson just yet. So I think it's going to be a little closer. I do like Navy, just the fact that they have a nice win over Hopkins this year. They had a close loss to Georgetown and St. Joe's. Those are just 1 goals. They could have gone either way. They could be unbeaten at this point in the season. Reagan Roloffs, 36 goals, 14 assists, 87 draw controls. And their goalie, to me, will be the difference. Joe Torres, 7.93 goals against average. She's stopping 52% of the shots she's faced. So I think that gives them the edge. But I think if there's a coach that's going to get her team up for a game like this, it's Michelle Tumalo. She's going to be all over them to say, hey, this is an opportunity, guys. Rivalry game. Let's change the course of history here, and let's get this done.
You know what they say? Throw the records out.
Yes, they do.
And I mean, that rivalry in particular, too. It doesn't matter. Football, basketball, baseball, lacrosse. It doesn't matter what you're playing.
Golf,
Throw the records out when Army and Navy get together. You never know.
I can't wait. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah.
And if you watch any lacrosse game this weekend or 2, Army, Navy, men's and women's this Saturday.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't get better than that.
Yeah, it doesn't. It should be fun. Should be a good weekend once again. We're winding down. Just kind of weird.
Second to last week of the regular season.
That's it, right?
It feels like we just started, but
April 21.
Yeah, here we go.
The first normal-ish season in a long time.
And you know what the thing is? The crazy part about these final 2 weeks, and it happens like this every once in a while, but I feel like we know just as little now as we did about a month and a half ago. And it's like the final 2 weeks are going to determine what happens come tournament time. But I still feel like I know so little about a majority of these teams.
Right. I think there's a couple spots where you're like, okay, I get what they're all about. I know what kind of run they can make. But the majority of it, like 90%, is
I don't know.
Like, I don't know if this team can make the tournament. I don't know if they can win the last 2
I don't know. Most teams can even make their conference tournament.
It's true. And you don't know who can win those conference tournaments either and get the automatic bids. And that applies everywhere. We were talking about the America East today, but like that's just as crazy as anything else. You don't know what's going on.
Catamounts 4-0.
Vermont and UMBC, and you know that's a weird conference tournament each year. You got UMBC who came in the tournament a couple of years ago as an under 500 team after winning their conference tournament down there at Stony Brook. So
look at the NEC. Nobody ever wins the regular season title and also wins the conference tournament.
And then you've got the SoCon. Jacksonville's been the class, but they very well might lose to like Richmond in the final. Who knows?
Yeah.
No offense, guys. But you never know. That's what we're trying to say. And
it's going to be
so much fun
couple of weeks here, and we will keep talking about it. So we hope you enjoy your college lacrosse weekend. We'll see you right back here on Tuesday.